and welcome to Literary Hype. I am Stephanie, your literary hype woman, and today's author conversation is so much fun. Like, Nikki Payne and I met at San Diego Comic-Con, and within a week, I had read her book, Sex, Lies and Sensibility, and we had booked an interview. Sex, Lies and Sensibility, as you could guess from the title, is a Jane Austen retelling that is set in the modern world. It's got some racial diversity that you don't often see in Jane Austen's books, and it's so good, guys. It's so good. So without any further ado, here's my conversation with Nikki Payne. Well, welcome to Literary Hype.
I'm so happy to be here.
I'm happy to have you because
I'm happy that you're happy to have me, that I'm happy to be here.
So before we get to talking about the book, we have to talk about what you told me you were going to do at San Diego Comic-Con, because I did not get to get into your panel. They kicked me out.
Wow.
And they were like, it's too many people and you're just too much, so get out.
Wow.
You said you were going to bring up clowns because certain other authors have issues with clowns.
Yeah.
How did that conversation go?
I have to speak my truth. Okay. We are a silent majority. Those folks who aren't necessarily afraid of clowns and would maybe, I don't know, kiss a clown if push came to shove. We out here, folks. We out here. Okay? We had a discussion. We were talking about magicians v. clowns. I came down heavy on clowns. And now I'm the social pariah. Now I'm the person that is given ill. But when I tell you, when I spoke my truth in that panel and said, maybe clowns, there were people who came up in the line and they were like, me too. And I knew it. Silent, but deadly. Well, maybe not deadly. That's not going to help with
No, that does not help.
That doesn't help. But we're a silent majority and we're out here.
Sorry, Julie and Allie. You may have lost this one.
We got into it. A little tussle.
I'm glad, because they need to be harassed a little bit here every once in a while.
Every once in a while.
So your book is Sex, Lies and Sensibility, your most recent one.
Yes.
So for anyone who has not already seen this on social media, what's it about?
Great question. Two sisters find out at the worst possible time, their dad's funeral, that they are the outside children. And the real family is not playing nice. So all of their comfortable life is over. And the last thing that they are given is a dilapidated inn in rural coastal Maine. And spoiler alert, not a lot of black folks in Maine. So our girls were nervous. They picked up and moved to Maine. And before they even shook the dust off of last season's Prada boots, here comes a hot indigenous tour guide who walks into their home and says, oh, this place is mine. So the book starts off with a bang, and hopefully they learn how to love, how to get together. Who knows? It's a romance. Spoiler alert, they do.
I can't believe you just spoiled this whole thing.
Oh, my God.
Oh, my goodness. But I mean, if we're going to talk about that part, because that's a little expo.
Yeah.
Where they were little exposed.
Exposed at the expo.
That was a delight to read.
First of all, I love that you say that, exposed at the expo, because they were circling around each other so long. And the thing about both of them is that they are so wrapped up in what ought to be. This isn't a spoiler, it's on the first page, but the main character, Nora, has had a really terrible sex tape circulating around her and about her for years and years. And so when people recognize her, it's never for a good reason. It's always because of what they saw. And so when she finally lets herself feel passionately with Bear, it's so good when they're on the page and they are feeling each other, feeling on each other. I loved writing that because it was such a release of tension.
It was a very spicy, fun scene. And I may have been reading that in the Uber with a very old man as my driver and just being like, do not look at me, sir.
Don't even look at me.
This is not the moment. And he kept wanting to talk and I'm like, this is not the moment.
This ain't our time, sir.
Just let me have my moments with these characters.
Oh.
Anyway, so as the title would suggest, this is a Jane Austen retelling.
Yes.
So
how did you take Jane Austen and mix in a little Schitt's Creek vibe?
Yes.
And turn this into a delight?
I love Jane Austen. She was like foundational text for me. And I was always thinking about what you could add, what you could change, what you can do to make Jane Austen weird and different. So there are a lot of texts that feel like super foundational, like Shakespeare, right? And you like kind of know the beats almost like in your head, right? Sometimes we know the beats of Pride and Prejudice or Shakespeare like in our heads, but like what would it take for Shakespeare to suddenly feel alien? What would it take for Pride and Prejudice to suddenly feel like a completely new thing? And so like you think about all of these additions you could add to make something comforting and fun seem new and exciting. I mean, in a way, it's kind of like this analogy of like when you're sampling a song in hip hop, right? So if you listen to Biggie, he sampled this like 70s funk song, Juicy, maybe it was 80s, and it's a great song by itself. Like your grandparents are like jamming, your parents are like jamming to Juicy, and they're like, yeah, this is a good song. It can't get any better. Sorry, you know? And then you hear that same beat with a little bit of additions, and you hear Biggie say, it was all a dream, right? And it's a new thing all of a sudden, right? And that's what I love about retellings. What I love about Jane Austen is that you can jam that original. It's just like, I love this. It's a great song. You can't get any better. But hearing Biggie over it or hearing it in a new way, it just feels so fresh. And it keeps the thing that you love about the old song too, you know?
How do you approach, because this is your second Jane Austen retelling, how do you approach keeping it fresh while still working off of something that is so iconic and well-known?
Yeah. One of the things that I really love to do is have a conversation with myself about what are non-negotiables, like what things have to stay. You have to kind of know the beating heart of that show. I mean, of the book, of the anything that you're retelling. And for Pride and Prejudice, for example, like Dorsey couldn't be like nice to her at the beginning. You know, like as much as, you know, sometimes in modern romances, sometimes we don't like assholes, you know what I mean? And the beginning of the book, Dorsey had to be an asshole and he had to need redeeming, right? And so those are types of things that I felt like were non-negotiable. There are certain aspects of Lisa having an embarrassing family, you know, that to me were non-negotiable to the idea of a snob who falls in love with a, rebellious, raucous family. And like, what happens there, you know? And so I have these negotiations with myself about what has to stay and what can go.
What is it about Jane Austen and her work that has transcended generations and centuries and is still something that we love and want to see new takes on all these years later?
That's such a good question. What I love about Jane Austen is that we encounter these women, Jane Austen's heroines, in these moments of like, particularly in the Regency or the Georgian period, these moments of their greatest agency. Like a woman right before she's about to be married has the most choice to change the trajectory of her life forever. So if she makes the wrong choice, she makes the wrong decision, it's curtains, right? And so this is the moment in a place where your life and your job is so circumscribed and your work is so set out for you that you can actually exercise your greatest choice and change your life for the better. So I love Jane Austen because we're encountering women who are at the very peak of their ability to change their life. And you love a story to start off like that. And they make all of these decisions that would almost seem like they'll never get the thing that they desire or deserve, which is status, which is a safe marriage, which is love and safety. But like Elizabeth said no. She said no to the obvious thing, to the safe thing because of her own principles, right? And yeah, just seeing these women sit out here and dare greatly, you know what I mean? In these moments where they're supposed to be making these amazing choices is something I think that will continue to resound forever and ever.
You do have this really great author's note at the beginning about writing from another perspective. What made you decide to make our hero Indigenous, and what was the process like for you to learn about that culture so you could effectively write it?
That's one of my favorite questions because I'm a cultural anthropologist. I have a PhD, and I wanted to take that so seriously. I felt so deeply that there's some stories that that you can tell, but you can't kind of phone it in on, right? You can't like fuck it up, right? And so I wanted to tell this story about these two people encountering each other from completely different worlds, but I didn't want to phone it in. And one of the things that I feel like is my superpower is sitting down, talking with people, understanding cultural context. So I packed up and traveled to Maine and went to hang out on the reservation, chatted with scholars, talked with the community. What is bothering you? Like, what's happening in your community, right? So the idea, even the situation with Bear and the dam, like that was a real situation, right? So I will say when I was starting this work, one of the things that I knew that I was going to put these women in a space of like non-safety. So when we think of Maine, I think for Black people, a lot of Black folks like think about places where there are Black people and where there aren't Black people. Just because of like our history in the world, people think of like where they or will be safe, right? And so when we think of Maine, we think, okay, no Black folks in Maine, you know? And so when I wanted to put these women in a place where they would know absolutely nothing, know absolutely no one, I thought of Maine. And so getting these women to Maine and also just like owning land, inheriting land in Maine, I felt like it was a tricky situation because I was doing a lot of research about like tribal sovereignty in Maine and some of the issues that were happening there. And I started to think about like kind of what it means to own land and what it means to inherit land, right? And I thought it would be an interesting conversation for an African American to come into a space and say, I've inherited this land is mine. And for an African American and a Native American to have a real conversation kind of about land ownership, about things like without a white person in the room. Like these are like the two oldest subcultures in America. And they had so much to say to each other, you know, around who can own land, about what the history of that like experience was. And I just thought it was like a rich conversation. I started out with this, like, there's this gag of like a Black woman coming down and this Native American man accusing her of like Christopher Columbusing. And she's like, me? How can I, you know?
Which was brilliant, by the way.
I just wanted that experience of like, can you do this? Like when you don't see yourself in that aspect of like being a colonial power, right? Can you still do that? And so that seems like very like academic, but it really just started from a gag. You know what I mean? That I just wanted the gag. And like I mentioned, I traveled to Maine and traveled and like spoke with leaders, spoke with academics. I hung out on the reservation and I talked to people about like what was pissing them off, what was bringing them joy, what was fun, what was exciting, what was like frustrating. And I wanted to, as much as I could, represent that without being under the idea that I am telling this story representing them for them, right? So there was like this tension between, you know, telling a story with a character with a different culture than mine and like trying to be the culture. And that's like the step that I didn't want to take, right? I think any creatives have as a need to operate with empathy. So I can write a million stories about like a Black woman and still not like write about the Black female experience because I'm just me. And so when I think about writing a character from a different culture, I do think about any type of writing endeavor is about creativity. And if we don't trust ourselves to truly empathize with another culture, another race, another gender, then, you know, what are we doing as writers? What are we doing as creatives? You know?
Just preach.
Yeah, sorry, that was long.
Oh, no, you're good. Nora has been through it. So this very passionate moment that we discussed, crafting that as what happens in that moment is like the worst thing that could happen for her because of her background.
Yeah.
At what point did you know that was something that needed to happen?
Yeah.
For her to move forward in her own personal story?
That's great. Which exact moment are we talking about?
The exposed at the Expo.
Exposed at the Expo. Yes, that's a great point because The thing that Nora, from the very beginning, first couple of pages, that she notices all the time are eyes on her, right? Who is looking at me and why? And it's become this huge anxiety for her, for people to, like, almost seem to know her by her body, you know? To know her by what they've seen of her body. And it was this great anxiety, is that when she was exposed at the Expo, it was everything that she kind of knew about herself at one time. Like, clothes half off, like, being willing to, like, go all the way, you know what I mean? Willing to go all the way in public again, you know? And to feel like that she would never not be that person from 7 years ago. That she was still, in the end, just this type of woman who would go all the way with very little, you know? And it shocked her to realize, like, this actually is maybe the type of woman I am. And she didn't want that, you know? But, and it was like this moment of, like, yes, like, she's finally, like, letting go and realizing what she wants. And then it came to the point where everyone saw, and it was like, oh, now she went right back to who she was before. Like, oh, I'm not this person. I'm not that person before. So she's always fighting with herself. So that moment was like, oh yeah, this is proof that, you know, I am who that woman was 7 years ago. She didn't like that woman, I guess.
And you blend these situations with so much humor. Like, there's a line about he was harder than advanced trigonometry.
Yes, girl.
I nearly choked.
Yes.
On my water.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
Is that hard? It's hard.
It's so hard.
It's so hard.
Math is so hard.
It's so hard, baby.
Like, even normal trigonometry is too hard.
Yeah, it's harder than advanced trigonometry. You know that what was going on in those pants. Okay?
It's very descriptive. So talk about blending humor with this depth that these characters are going through.
I think we do that, like, naturally, you know, to have, like, this full experience of something. Like, sometimes even, like, at a funeral, you're, like, telling a story about someone that you loved, and it sparks a moment of comedy, you know? I had an uncle who died, and everyone was talking about how he died owing everyone about $20, you know what I mean? And we love that uncle. We also, like, laughed at that predicament. And I think sometimes to have a full emotional experience, you can be so turned on and then notice one thing in the moment and just, like, that's crazy, you know? Or you can be so sad and have a moment of joy in the midst of that. It's how we actually experience things. And I wanted these emotions to feel, like, robust, you know, like you're feeling this, but this is also your experience as well. So I think, honestly, it's how we actually experience life, this whole 360 emotion, you know?
And going along with humor, you recently posted on Instagram about your weird crushes and how they influence your writing.
Yes.
Which of your weird pop culture crushes are represented in Bear?
Oh my gosh. Bear is... I love Tevin Campbell so much, and he had this song called Can We Talk? And it was just about this reticent man who keeps missing his chance to go after the girl. And it's like, can we talk just for a moment? And Bear, I wouldn't call him a shy man about what he wants, but he also doesn't think he deserves much. He's caught up in this loop of guilt and will take what he's given, but doesn't also believe that he deserves anything. So he would never actively reach for something without that secondary guilt that slaps right on him. So I would say Tevin Campbell, he's just such a very good boy, you know, and a shy guy, and I love that.
Throughout the book, Nora has these moments where she's like 1, 2, and 3.
Yes.
What about her character made you feel like having lists of at least 3 things was necessity for her?
I love this because Nora fundamentally thinks she knows how everything is going to end up, you know? And for people like that who think they know, like, the end of everything, like, I wanted to continuously shock her, you know? To say, like, she starts off saying, look, let me tell you what's going to happen if you do these 3 things. And sometimes she's right, but she's wrong a lot, you know? And it's because she wants to justify inaction. She wants to justify not doing a thing because she thinks that she knows how it's going to end. She waited too long to tell Bear about her past because she was starting to like him, even grow to love him. And she felt like she knew once he knew it was going to be all over. It was going to, like, that whatever tiny little gossamer thing that they were building was going to end. And she held off because she was so desperate for that connection.
With Bear's situation, if he would just get married, he'd inherit money.
Yeah.
If you were in that situation and with a marriage for a couple months could land you a bunch of money, would you do it?
I would do it. I mean, that's the thing. Is like, unlike Bear, who has these dreams of like building this home for his wife or whatever, and was reluctant to do the thing that he just maybe should have done much earlier. I would have done it earlier. But the thing was, like, he had all these dreams, and it would take him, if he would have done that, he would have just had to slowly give up on them and just like, don't worry about it. Just stay where you are. Just, don't try to rise above anything. Just stay on the red, stay where you are. And it's hard. It's hard to tell someone that the best thing for you right now financially is to pay off all these bills and just stay where you are, And he was kind of hiding from it, He was hiding bills. He was in debt, This is a hero who's not wealthy and could solve all of his problems by just giving all of his money up to this problem. But that's a hard-ass sell, I mean, what would you have done?
I have no idea. Bear and Nora worked together on this DIY.
Mm-hmm.
How much research did it take for you to figure out, like, the codes and what they would need to do and how to write the project, even though it's kind of a background-ish thing, but still keeping that relevant and clear as to what's going on?
Yeah. It was hard for me. My first draft, it was like both. It was Nora and Bear. And I was like, oh, I'm done. I guess I'm done. And then I got my beta readers to read it, and they're like, wasn't this about revamping a house? And I was like, damn it. Keeping me honest. Right? So I had to think through the types of things that actually happen when you are like revamping a house, and like contractors never show up, or when they do show up, it's much longer than the expectation. And like, it's incredibly frustrating and time consuming. And so I wanted to focus on that frustration, but also focus on what happens afterwards, that point of pride, when you have actually, like, maybe not perfectly, but have pulled it off, And they made a home that they were proud of.
This was book 2 of the Jane Austen books. Is there going to be a book 3? And if so, what can you tell us about it?
I'm so excited about my next book. It is a murder mystery. If you've read Pride and Protest, you will recognize this character had a penchant for detective work, and maybe his dreams came true. Maybe he's a detective now. And this character, Maurice, is a detective, and he is now forced to work with a Reddit detective. So she is a person who, like, knows who actually got together on Love is Blind. Do you know what I mean? She, like, goes through all of these, like, TV detective work. She does all of that. Works on cold cases, listens to podcasts, but she's never actually been kind of outside. She's super sheltered. She is living this life almost in this, like, cult-like existence, and she has to move out of her shell to work with Maurice, and it is just, it's unhinged. It's giving, like, The Virgin and the Rake, and they have to, like, solve a case together, and it is fantastic. It's just it's so fun. It's a caper. And yeah, the girlies, the true Jane Austen girlies are going to recognize some taste of a little bit of Northanger Abbey, just some Easter eggs, but it's for the girlies. But if you've never read Northanger Abbey, it will be no big deal. But if you have, you got to be like, I see what you did there.
I love it. I'm so excited. Cannot wait. One thing I love about you in the short time that we have known each other is how much you love your fellow writer girlies.
Oh, God, I love them.
What does the writing community mean to you, especially in the romance space?
Let me tell you something. I was just on another panel, and I was at a signing, and everyone who came to my signing said, oh, my gosh, I had to come to your table because Julie Soto and Allie Hazelwood were screaming about your book. I mean, that is the thing. And I had a line swirling around, going on forever and ever, and everyone came to say, I heard about you from the panel. To me, like, writing community is just shouting about people behind their back, to people who would love their work. And that's the thing that I'm always doing is like, hey, do you like this and this? You're going to love Regina Black. Do you like this and this? And like, to me, that community of like talking about someone when you're in the room, when you're in a closed door and you think of someone and you think of an opportunity, I feel like the writer friends are always the ones saying, think of Nikki Payne, ask this person, ask that, and it's always them.
I mean, Allie and Julie were the ones that told me about you.
Yeah.
So, and look at us now. That was, what, 9 months ago?
Yeah. Honestly, like, that's the level of support that I feel like, I don't know if it's just for the romance girlies, but we get it. The romance girlies get it.
And how does that translate with the readers at an event like this? We're at Steamy Lit Con, surrounded by thousands of readers.
This con, these readers are some of the most diverse collection of readers ever. They are ready for diverse romance, like for queer romance, for a romance that says why choose. Like, they are here for it. I think for a long time, we have been told the types of romances that sell, the types of romances that are worthy, the types of romances that are good. And these readers are here looking for more. And that's why I love Steamy Lit, because they're pushing past the envelope. They're saying, what else? There's more. What else? And these are the readers asking what else.
Is there anything else you want to talk about?
Can I hear, what's something that you've read that's just like blown you away?
I've been reading The Night Ends with Fire by KX Song, which is a Mulan retelling, but she's driven by greed and ambition instead of like family duty.
Oh, wow.
So it's way more realistic.
Okay.
Which is, plus there's a fantasy element to it, so it's a romantasy.
Is it a romantasy? And it's called The Night Ends in Fire?
Mm-hmm.
Say less. Done. Check. Read.
And the first print run has gorgeous edges.
Oh, you had me at Mulan retelling.
Why are retellings such a big deal right now?
Let me tell you something. I know people are just like, oh, another retelling, but I think retellings are significantly more creative work. Like, not more, but like the creativity involved in retelling a work is extremely, extremely high. Like, the thing is that you have to take the bones of this work and make it fresh. And the work of making it fresh is the creativity. Of course, you can retell Jane Austen 3 years later they all are wearing empire dresses and it's the same, like, you can just redo that, or you can make it completely revolutionary. And like, if you tell me this is based on Mulan, then I know that there's going to be a hot ass general that I can, you know what I mean? That
he's there.
She's gonna bump heads with, and like, I'm here for that, but like, this is what I mean. Like, the things that I can be excited about are still there, and the things that I don't know about is still a mystery. Yeah.
Well, since this is literary hype, what books are you hyped about?
Oh gosh. Okay. I loved this book, The Starling House by Alex Harrow. I tell anybody that is like standing and up and alive to please get it, because it's like there's a Boo Radley of it all. Do you know what I mean? Like, if you can imagine like what would happen if like Boo Radley fucked, like, that's the book. It's also gorgeously written. It's beautiful. It's set in Kentucky, but it just has this like this aspect of like the Beauty and the Beast, but you don't know who the beauty is and who the beast is. Oh, it's just so good. It's fantastic.
Well, thank you so much for taking time to talk about your books with Literary Hype.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thanks again to Nikki for taking some time out of her Steamy Lit Con schedule to talk about her most recent release, Sex, Lies and Sensibility, and to give us some sneak peeks at what's coming next for her. If you want to get a hold of this book or Pride and Protest, the links to do so are down in the description for you. If you enjoyed this conversation, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you have not done so already, and share it with a friend. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time.